I've always, of course, said this before, been fascinated by nature and always wanted to explore it. There's nothing I ever want to do more. When I was a little kid, my parents would say, no, they put restrictions on how much time I could spend hiking because they wanted me to be more well-rounded. So you can't just do that all the time. You gotta, you can go hiking 2 days a week, and you can spend as much time on those days hiking as you want, but that's it. And I still, that's what I want to do, and I do that. I see the world as an artist, and I see the world as an amateur ecologist. If I'm Anyone who knows me knows that if we're outside and I'm having a conversation with you, wherever we are, I'm constantly going to be, distracted from you. If a bird flies over me, I've got to see what it is. I just can't help it. And I'm always, when I don't have a car, I get around on a bicycle. That's how I get around. When you're in a car, you're so insulated from the natural world, and you can't see stuff. You're blocked, and you really have to pay more attention to the road than you do on a bicycle. You can't hear anything. You can't smell the smells. And on a bicycle, it's all right there, and you see so much more. And I've trained my eyes I know how to look for stuff, and I'm constantly, no matter if I'm out of doors, I'm looking for interesting plants and animals. I like to ride along the Jordan River Trail. Was riding along that. This was last November, and I saw this bird that didn't look like something that wasn't sure what it was. I thought maybe it was a summer tanager, which is we're way north of where they should be. And I looked at it through the binoculars and took some pictures of it. It was a hepatic tanager, which has never been seen before in Utah. So I was the first person to ever see a hepatic tanager in the state of Utah, which was pretty exciting. But I think most people wouldn't have noticed that bird because it was just a sort of yellowish grayish bird. When you're really painting seriously, you start doing that naturally. You start just, if you're at the grocery store, look at just how the neon lights reflect off of the egg cartons and stuff, and just look at that. Look at what light does. Look at what shadows do. Look at how they have shadows dissolve on a curved surface and stuff. There's always, you find yourself constantly studying that, and there's always something to learn about what light does when it hits, what colors do, and how colors affect each other. And I'm at an age now where I'm starting to develop a sense of history about ecology, and how starting to notice how things are changing over time. Because I've been doing this now for 50 years. I've been looking at the same country every day, and you notice trends and changes, and notice animals adapting to the changes that we've made a lot of changes on the land over the last 50 years, and you've seen a lot of animals adapt to it, and a lot of animals fail to adapt to it. And it's really interesting to see how that works. A lot of surprises. One thing that a really major difference we've had here is Cooper's hawks. When I was a kid growing up in Emigration Canyon, they were pretty common up there. They were very wild birds. You'd see them nesting in the wildest areas. But starting in the early 1980s, they started nesting in Salt Lake City. The first one I ever saw was the first nest I know of in Salt Lake was, I think it was in 1983. My friend Steve Chingren and I, who I grew up with in Emigration Canyon, found a nest of Cooper's hawks in the middle of Liberty Park, and we'd never heard of Cooper's hawks nesting in the city. And we trapped and banded them with the necessary, with the proper federal permits to do that. And today, you can't swing the proverbial dead cat without hitting a Cooper's hawk nest. They're everywhere. And I think house sparrows are probably one of the important reasons that they're doing well here, because those birds are so easy for young, inexperienced hawks to catch, much easier than any of our native birds. And as it turned out, a couple of years ago, Utah was celebrating its 125th anniversary, and they had this celebration that they called Thrive 125. And one of the things they did was they commissioned artists to do artworks. And I proposed the idea of doing a painting depicting some of the ecological changes that have happened in Utah over the last 125 years. I was really excited that they accepted that proposal, because that's really always been my professional mission, to spark interest and awareness in other people of the natural world. And so I did this painting, and it shows, I tried to, in one painting, kind of represent the entire state, the Red Rock area over on one side, the city over on one side, the Wasatch Mountains over in one corner, the waters, the aquatic ecosystems, the Great Salt Lake, the aspen forests, and a story that went along with it, explaining each one of these subjects and the trend, the interesting trend that each one of those species represented, and how they changed, how their status has changed over the last 125 years in the state. One thing about the natural world, the closer you look at it, the more you discover. And when I was a little kid, I'd take a long bus ride home and go through nice country, and I'd just look out the window, and I'd see something, like I'd see a big tree or see a cliff and think, I wonder what's up on that cliff. And that next weekend I'd ride my bike down to and hike up to it to see it. And as you got closer, you'd find out more about that cliff. And then as you actually got up there, you'd find, the closer you got, the more you'd discover. And then finally you're up there, turning over rocks and seeing little bugs and stuff underneath. And you're just constantly rewarded the more closely you look. And so I like to kind of mimic that with my work. And I stick a lot of little things in there to reward you, reward the people who look closely. And I try to make my paintings, nothing makes me happier than seeing somebody see one of my paintings from across the room. It catches their attention from there, and then they get closer and closer and wind up with their nose against it, looking really closely. When that happens, that makes me really pleased. That's what I want people to do when they see my work. And I want it to work from all levels and to reward close scrutiny. Nowhere have I gone more crazy in that respect than on this big triptych that I did, Convoy Through the Canopy, of DeBraz's monkeys moving across the canopy. And they're in the company of long-tailed hornbills and palm oil squirrels. Both of those species like to follow troops of monkeys, because monkeys that are moving through the canopy, they cause a big ruckus and they kick up a lot of insects and stuff, frighten a lot of potential food sources. So these two animals like to follow monkeys, and so that's what's going on in this triptych. And there are a lot of little details, a lot of little creatures. In fact, I was at a show and the painting was up, and there were some kids looking at it and trying to find all the different things. And one little boy said, "There's a praying mantis." I said, "No, there's not a praying mantis there." He said, "Yeah, right there." He pointed at it. "God, there is. I didn't even remember putting that in there. There's something like 87 different species in there. A lot of them very tiny. Nowadays, I paint about 40 hours a week, about full time, about like the average person does. I used to, for that first 15 years, I painted over 100 hours a week. But thankfully, thankfully, I don't do that anymore. That's not healthy, I don't think. It's nice to, hang out with friends occasionally and do other things. The painting I'm working on now is kind of a crazy piece. It was based on, there are a couple of ideas in there that I was working with. One of them is, I often see like really neat things happen. This has happened to me twice, that I've seen a peregrine falcon in the city. Once it was in Florida, and once it was here in Salt Lake City, chasing pigeons right over the heads of a bunch of people, and nobody saw a thing. And every one of those people, the bird flew over their head. They would have paid for the experience to have a peregrine falcon fly 100 miles an hour over the top of their head. We can't see everything. We can't pay attention. We can't register everything. And we tune a lot of stuff out. And most people tune the natural world out. And so that's one of the concepts here. And then I also wanted to play with the concept of once again, the changing ecology of peregrine falcons. 100 years ago, they always nested on cliffs next to, usually near water. And nowadays, they've adapted to living in cities and nesting on skyscrapers. The skyscrapers stand in for the cliffs, and then pigeons stand in for the shorebirds that they typically, traditionally have fed on. And so I'm playing with both of those ideas. And then I've, as usual, stuck in a lot of little details in there for people to, some of them kind of funny little details to reward those who scrutinize it closely. The most important lesson that I've learned in 35 years of being a painter is to get over my fear of failure. I was too interested in creating masterpieces and not interested enough in learning how to create masterpieces, which is really the first step of creating masterpieces. And I'd be afraid of attempting, I have these ambitious ideas, but I didn't want to spend a month working on something that wasn't going to work. And that really kept me from doing a lot of things. And once I realized that attempting to do something beyond my ability that's the best way to learn how to do what you're trying to learn how to do. And then I really stopped being afraid of that, and I've always really tried to reach beyond my grasp and try things that I'm not sure I know how to do. And I think that's getting over that did more to help me be a good artist than anything else.